Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Bro Doc Talk. My name is Henry Lewis III. I am a residency program coordinator and former pre-health advisor.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Omar Young. I am a maternal fetal medicine specialist and medical educator. Today, we have a special guest, and I will let Henry introduce him.
Yes, a very, very special guest. Very happy to have him on. Dr. Daryl Traylor, who is a second-year medical student. I'll let him kind of introduce a little bit more about himself. But this episode is titled 50-Year-Old Med Student. So we're very excited to hear a little bit about your journey. So Dr. Traylor, tell us a little bit more about you, where you're from, schooling, all of that.
Yeah. So I was born in Houston, Texas, child of the 70s. So grew up with good music. But I attended high school in a little town just north of Houston called New Caney. At the time that we moved out there, the neighborhood that we lived in Houston, Third Ward, was starting to feel the impacts of the crack epidemic and things like that. So my dad thought it would be safer to move elsewhere. He didn't really know anything about the area we were moving to. As it turned out, my sister and I were one of maybe 3 or 4 Black students in the entire school district. So that definitely had a huge impact, not always for the positive, but definitely had a huge impact on me growing up. After high school, enlisted in the Army, moved all over, had many jobs, doing everything from cleaning out septic tank trucks to public health research to being a professor just before I started medical school. Finished my PhD last year, and then 2 weeks after my dissertation defense, I found myself in medical school. At that time, I was 49, and here I am now.
What is your PhD in?
Nursing and healthcare innovation. My research examines how and why primary care providers make decisions to provide HIV PrEP to African Americans in the southern United States.
That's really interesting. How did you get involved in that area of research, and did that, give you a jumping off point for this career in clinical medicine?
So my interest in HIV/AIDS work actually goes back many years. My best friend from the Army, Jevin Lucina, he died from AIDS. Was a victim of stigma. He wasn't allowed to go home to die. So he lived with me for the last 6 or 7 months of his life. And, I took care of him. And just seeing, I don't know, just the idea of somebody dying in that day and age of HIV/AIDS really bothered me, especially, looking at how his family and friends and other people close to him, treated him. Additionally, my wife's father, he was HIV positive, gay Black male. He was HIV positive for many years. He actually died from a aortic aneurysm. However, I always say in a roundabout way, he died of HIV stigma as well. So on the night that he died, the hospital he was in Detroit, Michigan, they refused to do the surgery. The surgeons and hospital staff were afraid of his HIV status, and so they let that man bleed to death. I was on the phone with my then girlfriend, listening as all this was going on. So things like that should never happen. So that's sort of been the driving passion behind the work that I do in HIV and AIDS. And I hope that, I'll get to continue doing this sort of work once I'm finished with medical school and residency.
That's very impressive. So with that point about, you want to do this work maybe later on when you finish medical school and residency, let's talk about you getting to medical school.
Yeah.
And where did this interest, where did it start? Why did it start? How did you get here?
Oh,
You've had
man.
a great career, for a while. So how did you get to this point?
I think the first sort of inkling that maybe medicine was something that I wanted to do, it'll sound cliched, but it really, I guess, was when I was a child. My mother had a substance abuse issue at that time. And I guess one summer, this must have been about the summer of 1981 or 82, me and my mother were home alone. I was upstairs in my room and I heard some kind of a crash downstairs. So I run downstairs and I see that she's laying underneath like a china cabinet or this etagere cabinet that we had in the kitchen. She used to keep her Xanax and things like that up there, and I guess she was climbing on top of that to try to get her Xanax. Um, I didn't know what to do. I thought she was dead, actually. She was just laying there, wouldn't wake up. I didn't know what to do to help her. This was in the days when 911 was just starting to roll out to some parts of the Houston area. So, there was nobody that I could really call. And I just remember sitting there beside her all day until my dad got home from work and he got her to the hospital. But I just remember feeling so helpful and thinking, I wish there was something I could do to help my mom. At that time, I don't think I would have put my finger on saying, well, I wish I was a doctor. I just knew there was something I wish I could do to help her. Right. So years later, enlisted in the Army, and I was trained as a combat medic. And I had the opportunity to deliver a baby, while I was in San Antonio finishing training. And that was powerful. Having the opportunity to be at the right place at the right time with the right skill set to do something to help somebody, that gives me goosebumps to this day. And I remember the young lady, telling me that she was really happy that me and my preceptor, were there for her at that moment. And so from that point, the idea of being a physician was set in stone in my mind. I just didn't know how to get there. But from that point on, it's just been like, yeah, there's nothing other than being a physician that I'd want to be, despite all the other careers that I've had.
So it sounds like that you have had some traumatic events happen to you that have really propelled you to where you are today.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people of color in medicine particularly share those same experiences in which we see things that are around us and we want to make those situations better.
Yeah.
And so I commend you for undertaking this path because, as you well know, medicine is not something that anyone should enter into lightly.
Right.
There are better things that you could do with your life, but if this is something that is a calling to you or is a passion to you, then you should actively pursue it. And so I totally understand your story.
Absolutely.
So with that being said, what obstacles did you face in getting from, yeah, I want to be a physician to now I'm in medical school? What does that path look like for you?
Man, I would say the first obstacle for me personally, I encountered in high school. Like I said, I was just one of a literal handful of Black students in my school. And, I didn't realize it. I was actually thinking about this morning, but didn't realize exactly how important having teachers and counselors that help to motivate you and push you forward, how important that really is. And I didn't have that in school. I was a decent football player and had a few schools looking at me. I never thought that I was going to go to the NFL or anything like that, but I always thought that I could use football as a means to get to school and propel myself forward academically. So and now I'm aging myself, but my senior year, SMU had started to recruit players because they were coming back from that death penalty, if you guys remember that. And I remember going to my high school counselor. They had sent me some recruiting literature. And so I went to my high school counselor and I asked her if she would sign off on some paperwork to release my transcripts and some other things to the football department. And she wouldn't do it. And she said, I think SMU is probably a reach for you. So you might want to think about going to a school like Sewell Ross or Tarleton State, maybe start off at even one of the community colleges, Kilgore or something like that, because I would hate to see you go to SMU and have all your hopes and dreams dashed. And that really did something, because I'm thinking, okay, this is the expert. She knows, I guess if she's telling me I'm not good enough to go to SMU, that must be the case. But that did something to me on a really deep level. I think academically, from that point on, it was just, how would I say, I didn't perform the best, in any of my college courses, very early on. And I think that I was always running from something, running from challenges and things like that because of what my high school counselor had said. It wasn't until, gosh, I guess I was probably doing my advanced training as a combat medic that I had a drill sergeant pull me aside and say, you can perform much better. You can do a lot better than what you're displaying in class, but you've got to put out some effort. He was really the first person outside of my immediate family to really show some belief in me, right? And it was like from that point on, Drill Sergeant Trees, I'll never forget him. He was on me every day, whether it was making sure that, I made my rack up perfectly, to doing those perfect push-ups, to going into the combat medic class every day and coming out every day, with nothing less than 100% on our end of day exam, whatever. He demanded perfection, but that created this system of belief in me that, hey, I can do it. I think from that point, after my active duty career, the next point was just sort of trying to figure out, okay, well, how do I actually get to medical school? I'd spent a semester at Texas Southern University in 1989 and finished that semester with a 1.67 overall GPA. So I had that GPA that I had to overcome. And what I found when I restarted my undergrad education at Arizona State University was that pre-health advising didn't want to have anything to do with me. It's like if you're already damaged goods in their eyes going into pre-health, they don't want to have anything to do with you. And this was significant because at Arizona State University, they have programs that can connect students to research or to clinical shadowing or, any of those things that students need to get to build out a resume to eventually build a successful application to medical school. But like I said, if you can't get past the gatekeepers, then what do you do? Right? I remember when it came to physician shadowing, my wife and I were emailing physicians literally all over the nation to find someone to shadow because I couldn't get access to these things through the normal channels at Arizona State University. I finally found my first physician to shadow in Lake Havasu, Arizona. So it's like, 140 miles away from Phoenix. So my wife and I drove out there and stayed for a week so I could shadow this pediatrician, Dr. Lorraine Bird. My second physician shadowing experience was a physician in Los Angeles. I had to rent a hotel out there, for a week to shadow. So I think just not having proper advising, was a huge hindrance, not knowing exactly which courses to take, when to take these courses. Again, not having access to these volunteer experiences. The next really big obstacle for me was financial. The first financial hurdle was trying to afford the MCAT prep course. I think when I took the MCAT initially in 2010, that was 16 or 1700 bucks for the course, and I had to go on a payment plan. And so I ended up being evicted from my apartment over the MCAT course because that thing was $1,700. So all of those things sort of came together to keep me out of medical school for an extended period of time. That said, I think that I've needed to learn all of these lessons so that I can help others, that are sort of struggling with these same sort of things. It's like now I know a lot of different shortcuts, if you will. I don't know if there's necessarily a shortcut, but an easier way to go about things, if that makes sense. And I can share knowledge with other students.
So I'm just curious now, if you were to talk to yourself from like 25 years ago, knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself?
So, man, if I could go back, okay, so instead of 25 years ago, can we go back to 1989 when I was at the first thing that I would have done I would have said, Daryl, don't be scared. So the first class that I took at Texas Southern University was general chemistry with Paul Thurston. He had taught my dad general chemistry when my dad was in pharmacy school, and the man was intimidating, right? And again, coming from the high school that I came from, they hadn't prepared me for what college life was like, particularly at a HBCU. I'm coming from an all-white high school going to an HBCU, very different environment. And so I remember having trouble in Dr. Thurston's class, and I didn't go speak to the man until literally 2 weeks before the end of the semester. And I remember when I finally went to talk to him, he said, well, what do you think I can do for you now? And again, it was just fear. I think that if I had spoken with him early on in the semester, if I had gotten over a lot of those fears, things probably would have been very different for me starting school. And I probably would have had, a much different experience. Probably would have got to medical school, many years before now. But I think there was just a lot of fear of the unknown, being a first-time college student, again, at a HBCU, coming from an all-white high school.
No, you bring up a very good point. So the lack of representation at all levels of training or professional development is something that I, see on a daily basis. And so when I have trainees of color, I particularly look out for them because I can see, myself in them. I didn't have like the mentorship, or I didn't see myself reflected in my teachers. And so essentially I'm like navigating this whole process in myself. But if I had the privilege of seeing someone like me back in the beginning, it would have probably changed everything. So I totally agree with you on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm fortunate because my wife, she finally got tired of seeing me beat my head against all of these walls with trying to get into medical school. So I'll never forget, in 2012, she came to me and said, Daryl, I'm going to get a job at a medical school so I can learn what it is that you need to do to get into a medical school. So she took her first job at a Western University comp out in California. She started as a GME coordinator, and then from there moved to where she is now, A.T. Still University, as a faculty member. But through these two jobs, she's been able to learn everything that a student would need to do to get into a medical school. So I would say she's really been my mentor and coach. And if it wasn't for her, I may not have had such a successful application season, back in 2020, 2021. But again, like you said, not having that representation, not having good, adequate mentorship, that can really set students of color back. Really can.
Yeah. And I would say, so in 2012, she learned how to help you get there. Did she also push you a lot? Because what I've learned in my experience with working with students and getting into med school, you can teach them what they need to do to get there, but if you don't hold them accountable and push them, a lot of them won't get there. Did she do a lot of that for you as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had some, financial issues that we had to navigate, but, she always said, look, once we, get beyond these financial issues and get to a point, where you can actually afford to go to medical school, that's what you're going to do. She's always told me from the time that we first met, I don't care what it is that you're doing, just make sure that you're going all out, balls to the wall to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
And even to this day, bless her heart, I wake up every morning at 0500, to get ready for class. She doesn't have to get up with me, but she gets up with me every morning to fix breakfast. When I get home in the afternoon, she has lunch ready for me. We'll take some time to cook dinner, lift weights, and then she's on me like, Daryl, okay, it's time for you to study, whatever. So, having that support is absolutely huge.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So tell us a little bit about, what it's like being, a medical school student today. Do you feel that, the time that you spent preparing to get to medical school was worth it, and you are a lot wiser and can go through the program a little bit better now? How do you feel about medical school now?
Um, it's definitely different than my PhD was. In the PhD program, you are charged with developing information, thinking about ways to use information, coming up with theories, that sort of thing there. Whereas medical school, it's no different in a sense than what I saw in undergrad, right? Biochemistry is biochemistry, whether medical school or undergrad, it's just so much more of it. And so adapting to the pace of medical school, that was a challenge in the first semester. Um, and that's one of the reasons why I think it's important for students to choose the right school. So at my school, our curriculum pretty much goes from 8 to 12 every day, Monday through Friday, for the first 2 years. So that gives a lot of time to come home and study. That being said, sort of trying to figure out, okay, what's the most efficient way to study? Do I actually sit here and read all 98 pages of this anatomy, or would it be better for me to look at a combination of videos and some PowerPoints or something like that? So how would I say, it's a lot of learn as you go. That being said, my school is very supportive. I've definitely reached out to our learning specialists, multiple times. I've got some really good study partners. So I'm learning. I am definitely a much better student than I was, in undergrad. um, but it's a lot though, man. It's a lot. You have to stay organized. There's no time to procrastinate. If you don't come home and study, you realize, okay, that material that I saw in lecture today, because I chose not to study it for whatever reason, I have to sort of leave it in the past. I can't go back and necessarily look at that because I have a whole bunch of more stuff to look at tomorrow and the next day and the next day, and that sort of thing there. So, keeping a good schedule, staying organized, using your resources wisely, all of that stuff is really important.
Yeah. So, what advice do you have to the pre-med student, as well as the student who is, let's say, 30, 40, 50, 60, and they say, I can't do this. I've always wanted to do it, but I can't do it. What advice do you have for them?
I would say that, especially if you're not the perfect student, just realize that there is a way to get to medical school. It may take you a little bit of extra time. The path may not necessarily be linear, but you can absolutely get to medical school. So don't be fearful that you can't get it done. At the same time, while you're in undergrad, try to use the resources that you do have available to you. Speak to your professors, get to know them. If you have learning specialists, on your campus, work with them to help troubleshoot any issues you may have with studying or memory retention or any kind of things like that. But just don't be quiet, because people can't read your minds. Another really important thing that I would tell pre-meds, as well as older students who are seeking to get to medical school, I didn't realize exactly how important the financial aspect of all of this is.
Mhm.
So it's really important to start planning early financially. And just to give you an idea of what I spent in my cycle, this was at the height of COVID. So by that point in time, all the medical school interviews were online. So students could afford to pretty much go to every interview they wanted to. They could do all the secondary apps they wanted to. So I spent around $8,400. And then, of course, there was the MCAT course has gone up in cost. That was probably close to 2,000. So you're talking about close to $10,000
Mhm.
that I spent, during my cycle. And when I say make a financial plan, I'm not just talking about saving money, but also making sure that your credit score is good. I didn't realize, for example, like the scholarship that I have from the government that's paying for my medical school now, they do a credit check. They want to see, do you have a pattern of paying all of your bills and things like that. I didn't know until recently that the National Health Service Corps scholarship, they do a credit check.
Mhm.
If you need to take out loans outside of the Grad Plus loans, those are going to be credit-based loans. I've got a classmate right now this semester who didn't get enough money in financial aid refund. And he told me, he said, Daryl, I don't have the credit to get a private loan. So having a financial plan and then protecting your finances, protecting your credit through undergrad into the medical school application process is so incredibly important. If you're an older student who is married and have family, before you get to medical school, develop a plan to make time for your spouse and your family. Understand that your successes and failures in medical school are theirs. They're going to be affected by what you go through. You need to make sure that whatever roles you have before you start medical school, you can continue those. For me, being a husband is always going to be my most important role. And so, I have to actively find ways to incorporate that into my life, if you will, while I'm a student, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Yeah.
Knowing what you just said, why would I want to do that if I'm like 35, 45, 50? Why would I want to put myself through that?
That's a valid question. I walked away from a career as a professor to pursue this. And for me, I knew that if I didn't at least try, I would always have that regret. I would always ask myself, what if? There's certainly, as you said before, there's certainly a lot of easier things that you can do to make a living. I think back to the days when I was a professor, particularly working full time from home. There was plenty of time for my wife and I to go to the gym, go to the movies. We traveled a lot. We had plenty of money. It was a really, really very nice life. So I gave up a lot. She gave up a lot, for me to be here. But again, if this is something, if it's a dream that's been put on your heart, whatever that is, if you don't do it, you're always going to live with that regret. At 50, I can truly say that I'm happier than I've ever been. And, who knows? I recognize that once I finish medical school, I'm probably going to face age discrimination applying for residency, or I may end up facing some age discrimination going for my first job. I can't control any of that stuff now. I just know that right now I'm happy. I enjoy what it is that I'm doing. The Lord will protect and guide and keep me as I go through the rest. To say it another way, you're going to age anyway. You're going to be 30, you're going to be 40, you're going to be 50. So it might as well be aging, doing the things that you like in life.
Right. Yeah, I love that. And kind of going back to, living with regret and trying to live your dream, yes, you could have continued your career as a professor, but there's that clinical piece as well that, from what I heard very early on, in your life, that you wanted to kind of do something more for your mom. There's that clinical piece that you're very passionate about that as a professor, you're not able to do. So I'm sure that was also a motivating factor as well.
Well, that was huge, but honestly, the last piece that I needed to push me to medical school, my dad, he's been a pharmacist here in the state of Texas now for 52 years, I think. In fact, last year he received some sort of prestigious award from the state of Texas for all of the years that he's been doing this. He has educated so many pharmacists, particularly Black pharmacists here at the state. He was truly a trailblazer in that he was one of that first group of Black pharmacists that was graduating from Texas Southern and then going on to open up doors for other Black pharmacists at the VA and, other hospitals that were previously closed to us. So he's done a lot, right? Well, he told me one day, and at this time, Dad had been in his career for 32 years. And I remember asking him, I said, Dad, are you happy with your job? And he said, son, I woke up every day for the last 32 years and not like my job. And he shared something with me that day that I don't know if he's even told anybody else in the family, but he said that not long after he got out of pharmacy school, he was in a select group of Black students who was admitted to UTMB down in Galveston. And I never knew Dad wanted to be a doctor. He said that was his chance to be a doctor, but my mother didn't agree with that, didn't support that. So, he gave that dream up. And to think about somebody in a career that they can't stand every day of their waking life.
Wow.
Despite all the good that he's done, in that career, definitely, opened doors, for me and my sisters. Like I said, you don't find many pharmacists or places, hospitals, whatever, in Houston, Texas, that don't know who my father is, and he hasn't liked that job. So that has always stuck with me.
That is hugely powerful.
It is. It is.
Wow. Well, on a lighter note,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about, you've mentioned so much about what you're doing with your career and the finances and the mentorships and the obstacles, but what do you do for fun? What do you do outside of this medicine thing? There's just a huge initiative in medicine nationwide about wellness, and
Yeah.
wellness means a whole bunch of things. For me, it doesn't mean doing yoga, which a lot of people so I guess my question is, what is wellness for you?
Yeah, so one of my favorite things, I love to cook. If my grandmother were here, she would tell you the story of, I guess I was about 5 years old, and I baked a bundt cake, this chocolate bundt cake, and didn't share with anyone in the family. It was around midnight when I baked this cake, and it's a beautiful cake, smelled really good. And I ran it upstairs and ate the whole cake, for myself. And since that time, I've loved cooking. So every night, my wife and I take out an hour or two of time to meal prep and cook together. We've turned our garage into a weight room. So, we lift weights, at night. Sometimes we'll get on our spinning bikes, and we have the bikes, not the Peloton, but the mixed bike. So we'll do that at times. Prior to COVID, we used to travel a lot. It seemed like every month we were either in San Diego or Las Vegas or LA or, up in Northern Arizona, doing things like that. I love to read. We've got 2 cats that keep us pretty busy. Lord willing, we'll have a child. That I don't know is how that will work with being a medical student, but it's something that we really look forward to, though. She and I study the Bible together. We meditate together. I'm sure you're seeing a theme that she and I do a lot together. So she is
support system.
yeah, she is my support system and my outlet. And of course, it's when I get to school, though, I do things like meditate each morning before the start of class, just to keep that anxiety level down. I've got my 2 best friends in medical school. We talk every morning before class, talk after class, things like that. So I try to live as balanced of a life as I can while being a student.
Yeah, as best as you can.
And when you're in practice, keep that up.
Yeah.
Absolutely keep it up.
Absolutely.
One more question before we end. I know it's early in your medical career, but any specialties in mind so far?
Oh boy. So emergency medicine pops out at me just because I was a combat medic, and I worked in civilian ERs for a while. But I also like family medicine and internal medicine, as I feel like those 2 would allow me to use my public health, community health background some. You and I, Henry, have been talking a lot about nutrition and what doctors need to know about nutrition. And I think that family medicine and internal medicine might also give me unique opportunities to talk to patients about, nutrition and just other lifestyle management sort of things.
Right.
And I say all that to say, though, that there's obviously a lot of fields of medicine that I'm going to be exposed to once I get to clinicals. So I think the best approach for me right now is to really sort of be open-minded to see what the Lord has for me. My wife teases me all the time. She says, well, you're going to want to be an OB-GYN. And I say, well, no, I don't. But, who knows?
Dr. Young,
I mean, my wife is clairvoyant that way. So I don't know if she's joking or if God is talking to her, but,
It's a great thing.
Yes.
Any last words of wisdom that you want to leave our listeners?
I would just say, again, whatever dreams you have, go for them. But understand that nothing comes to a dreamer but sleep. So that also means that you have to work towards what it is that you want in life. But don't let people or situations deter you, from the things that you want to do. There's a lot of people out there who will be willing to help you, as long as you open your mouth and ask for that help. And then have fun along the way. I mean, life is a very finite thing. And so you need to have fun. You need to enjoy this whole process. Um, I hope that the Lord lets me live to be 100, but whatever day that it comes that I leave this earth, I just want to be able to say that I lived happily, lived fully, and lived a life that's worth living.
That's
That is
awesome.
perfect. Yeah, that is perfect. Well, thank you again for being our guest on this episode.
My pleasure.
I think Dr. Young and I definitely enjoyed that. So to the listeners, stay tuned to another episode. Thank you.
We'll see you later.
All right, guys.